Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Fran, I'm from Venezuela, and today we're going to be watching a video called Why Britain is the Center of the World. So very humble title. I don't know, it's pretty funny to see it like that, without context. So let's check it out and comment, like, subscribe, and start. See, we're really good at maps, so I'm guessing that's...
Here's the original one. I think there's this misnomer that my orange coat is dead, but no, it's just dying quickly. There's just a good amount of this going on.
But he's American,
but I think this thing has a couple more years for sure.
Okay, so he's not,
this is my desk.
He's not egocentric.
I sit here all day and I work and I look at this map whenever I'm daydreaming. I just look at this map.
Weird way to cope.
I bought this map off eBay and it was in like an elementary school and now it's in my office. I notice something every time I look at it that kind of irks me. That something
irks you?
This zero. This zero, which is not just one number, but it's actually a corresponding line that looks like this.
Oh, okay. So it's not political. It's just like literally it's the center of the world.
Let's back up here for a second. The Earth is divided into lines.
Of course, yes. That's how they have like...
Sometimes they're curved like they are
like
on my map.
Timeline?
And whether or not they're curved or straight has to do with this concept of projection, which I'm not going to talk about here. I've talked about plenty.
Yeah, that's the thing having to do with maps.
A knife
in order
and a
for it to
globe
fit, right?
back in an old Vox video that I made. But just know that the Earth is divided up into lines, latitude and longitude lines.
Yes.
Ones that go up and down,
and ones that
go from side to side. All of these lines in the grid have a number associated with them. So for the up and down lines, there's a 0 point, and then anywhere to the right of that, or east of that,
like 30,
starts to go up
30
from 0 to 180 with
I don't know what's the term
next to it for east of the 0 line. And then everything to the left or the west of it has the same thing, 0 to 180 with a W for west. Okay, that center point is the 0 point from which all east and west things are measured. The same thing for these side-to-side lines. If you go up from here, you're going to start to get higher and higher until you get to 180 degrees north. Or if you go south, you will go.
And how do we know like what's the middle?
South, which
is
that's
the equator. I'm guessing.
Finding out where the 0 point should be for these horizontal lines is actually quite easy. The Earth has these two natural poles, which make for a natural top and bottom of the Earth. And halfway in between those two poles, you have this perfect center point, the equator, which is a very natural place to put this 0 point and to measure everything from.
That's crazy.
The up and down lines
like
are totally arbitrary where you decide them. Like, who's to say that, like, it couldn't be right here in Russia and this could be 0 and everything could go
what I was wondering. Like,
west
it could
and
be
east
sort of anywhere, really.
Or Japan, for that matter. Well, in fact, a long time ago, that's how it used to be.
Oh.
These maps with these grids were really, really important for navigating the world, and so everyone had to choose a 0 point.
Yes.
And most would just make their capital or their home base
Of course, they want
the
to make
point.
it the 0
If you lived
point.
in Japan, you would just make Japan the 0 point.
Yes.
And the rest of the coordinates would be measured against that 1 0 point, which was Japan. And same if you lived in France or Washington,
or Egypt or whatever.
This was fine because back then countries kind of just fought wars and competed with each other. They weren't really collaborating or aligning or trading
like modern times,
as much as they do today. And so everyone could just have their own maps centered around their place, and they did just fine. But then, around the 1800s, a few things started to happen that completely changed everything.
Maps started to be a thing?
Countries and empires, instead of just competing and fighting with each other, started to actually say, like, we should align with each other and trade.
Only in the 1800s?
For everyone.
Kind of
Pair this with the fact that map making and sea navigation was becoming like a big industry. It was no longer just the king ordering maps to be made for their like expeditions, but now it was like private businesses going out and doing things that private businesses do.
Sure.
And so there was now like a demand for good seafaring maps.
And for everyone to be on the same page.
Map making was trending. Seems like a pretty good time to be alive. Okay, and there was one more thing that was happening around this time that was super important, which is this.
Oh, trains, railroads.
Trains everywhere. Trains were just like popping up everywhere. And trains were also trending.
Yeah, but what do they need?
People were now able to travel like across the country, not just like on their horses, but on this whole system of trains where you could buy a ticket, get on a train, and end up.
But it's still like in the same country, I think.
And you know what trains run on, besides coal, is time. Timetables, schedules. How do you know when your train's gonna arrive, and when it's gonna leave, and when it's gonna get there? Time. Some universal set time.
Yes.
The problem is, back in the 1800s, there was no universal set time. Check out this piece of paper. Today, all of these cities and towns would be just on Eastern Standard Time, one time.
Oh my god, there's like so many.
Every town had their own time, depending on when it was noon for them. If they were a little bit east or a little bit west of here, that would be different than in Washington.
That's insane.
Total nightmare for trains.
Oh my god, how come I never thought of that?
The lifeblood of trains.
I thought everyone had like the same time.
And this time mishmash just wasn't going to work. Okay, so what does all of this have to do with this? Look at this guy.
Chester Arthur. Never heard of him.
You probably don't know who this person is. I didn't know who this person was. He was the U.S. president that no one remembers.
No idea
this
who
U.S.
that guy was.
president in the late 1800s saw a problem with all of this. He realized that having a bunch of different maps with a bunch of different 0 points based on whoever was making it was a problem. And he realized that not having a universal time zone or some sort of universal way of making the same time for everyone was also a problem. So he invited 41 countries to come here to Washington, D.C., where I live, and to sit around and think and talk about where this 0 point should be. Where should the center of the world be?
And everyone just sort of
so that
accepted
we can measure
Britain?
time as well as navigation. All maps could be normalized to this one spot. So after a moment of a bunch of white dudes sitting around in a room in Washington, D.C., which is kind of what's happening today in Washington, D.C., they came to a vote. And that vote, almost unanimously, said that the 0 line should be right here.
So everyone unanimously decided, but how come they all sort of like went, yes, sure, should be Britain.
This line, if you zoom in, goes right through London, England. It actually goes through a little outskirts town called Greenwich.
Oh,
Greenwich
that's
is the
Greenwich.
home of the Royal
that's why the
Observatory of the British Empire. This would be the place where the prime meridian, or the 0 point for the entire world, east and west, would start. Every country at the conference agreed that this should be the case, except for the Dominican Republic at that time, called Santo Domingo. They said no. They were the one country that didn't like this proposal. And France and Brazil actually abstained diplomatically, which was kind of them saying like, oh, we don't agree with this. France continued to make their maps with Paris as the center point,
they wanted to be
eventually
Paris.
they got on board as well. So that gets to the crux of my big question of why the 0 right there, which is a bunch of people voted on it.
Yeah.
But why were they so down with Britain having the 0 point being in the center of the world? Well, the answer is because it was 1884, and Britain was just really good at the ocean. The British Empire was by far the biggest, most powerful navy. They had the most experience with maps and ocean faring.
Oh, so they just trusted them.
And so it was kind of a natural choice to let Britain, the king of the ocean,
they were like, yeah, sure,
have
whatever you want.
this center point. And from then on, maps started to be drafted with Greenwich, this Royal Observatory, as the center point for the east-west divide in the world.
That's crazy.
Over time, this exact point, exactly where it's drawn, has shifted a tiny bit because of better tools to measure things, and so it's actually not literally on the Royal Observatory anymore, but it's effectively in the same place that was drawn in this 1884 conference. But they also established that all time in the entire world would be measured against this same spot, Greenwich. Noon at Greenwich, at the Royal Observatory, would be the peg against which all other time was set. Yeah. They called this Greenwich Mean Time. So you end up getting a map that looks like this.
If you look at it like that,
zoom in and you see Greenwich is right here.
Yeah, but it's confusing
if you look at it like that. Time. Okay. You go west of here and you start to get GMT -1 or -2, -3. You can come all the way back to the east coast of the United States, and this time zone is Greenwich Mean Time -5 right now. Sometimes it's -4.
Yeah, depending on the time of the year,
Daylight savings is down, whatever. But you get the idea. The more you go west, you go back from Greenwich Mean Time. If you go east, it's the opposite. You go forward to Greenwich Mean Time.
You add it.
So if it's noon at Greenwich, then this next time zone, it'll be 1 p.m. 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., etc. So these time zones have been marked up in these kind of strange shapes. Eventually, if you go 12 steps away from Greenwich, 12 time zones, you'll end up here at this mess. This mess is the International Dateline. This is where Greenwich Mean Time plus 12 or minus 12 ends up at this line, which is where a new day starts. So let me give you an example of what this would look like. Imagine it's 4 p.m. in Greenwich, England, right here at this Royal Observatory. It is 4 p.m. GMT on May 28th. If anyone wants to send me a birthday gift, May 28th. May 28th. It's May 28th at 4 p.m. GMT, Greenwich Mean Time. Sitting, chilling in the Royal Observatory, which I've never actually been to. I need to go to the
so in the other place, like 4 a.m.? I don't know.
I'm going to do that this year.
I'm not good at math.
At some point. Okay, so it's 4 p.m., May 28th. Across the ocean here in Washington, D.C. at that time, you can see that we go from 4 p.m.
It's like 11.
Minus 5, so 11 a.m.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's 11 a.m. here in Washington, D.C. at that exact time on May 28th. Head across the United States to the west coast of the United States to Seattle or Portland, and there it's 3 hours earlier than it is here.
Yeah.
You're now at 8 a.m. So it's 8 a.m. here, it's still 4 p.m. in Greenwich. It's still 4 p.m. in London.
Yeah.
Now you head into the Pacific Ocean.
Change.
Keep going west until you get to French Polynesia, at which
in the middle of the
it's
Pacific.
5 in the morning. You're now GMT minus 11. It's 5 in the morning.
That's crazy.
And then you get right up to this messy line. If you were to be in the Baker Islands, which is like a US, like random uninhabited island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, you would be at 4 a.m. So it's 4 p.m.
Yeah, it's 12
over in
hours
Greenwich. It's 4 a.m. on this random island in the Pacific. So then cross this messy looking line. It's still 4 a.m., but now it's the next day. It's May 29th at 4 a.m. Here in Fiji, at the same time, 4 p.m. at Greenwich, it's now 4 a.m. the next day, May 29th. So we went from being 12 hours behind Greenwich to being 12 hours in front of Greenwich just by going over
because, of course, you just like turn it around.
You could do this exact same thing going the other way. Start heading east and you see that it's 5 p.m. and 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. Head all the way over into Asia.
And you're going to end up.
And now you're getting closer to seeing how that 4 a.m. happens when you get over to Fiji. Now the caveat to all of this is, of course, is that some of these countries switch by an hour for like daylight savings type thing.
For like 6 months a year.
Ignore that. Imagine there wasn't daylight savings. Right now, in this moment, where daylight savings is at least ended in the United States, this holds across the whole world. Someday I'll make a video about this whole messy debacle. But the point of all of this is to say that because of this conference in 1884 to reconcile train timetables and to make maps more uniform, we now have this navigation and time system that rules our whole world. And Britain is just sitting at the center of it, of course. The British Empire may have fallen and the world has moved on from Britain being the center of the world in a lot of ways, but it's still technically the center of the world in a lot of ways.
I don't think so.
I'm going to put some links in the description for some of these cool tools that kind of help visualize time zones if you're interested in that sort of thing. But yeah, my question has been answered. I actually didn't know the answer to this question and I went on a deep dive and
it was really interesting.
Now I know. So now I'll sit at my desk and I will
look at the map and look at England.
Know the answer to why it's 0, and I think that was worth it. So, thanks.
Okay, so this was super. It was really interesting. I thought the video was gonna go like in a different direction, but it was actually about time zones and the timelines. It was really interesting. I've never wondered how come we have the time zones are the way they are. But I'm glad that I watched this because I feel like I learned a lot. It is kind of crazy, that fact that there was like a bunch. I think they were like, I don't know, 20 men that sort of like decided our time zones, all the world's time zones back in like 1884, and these days like it's still like that. Nothing has changed. So it's kind of crazy to think that some random man back in 1884 decided that sure, why not? Britain's gonna be point zero. And then, over 150 years, over 150 years later, like we still use it. And I don't think it's likely to change because like, why would you? I mean, it works. And can you imagine like changing that after so many years? Like it would be, insane. Nobody's gonna do that. And, but the fact that it was like everyone sort of like blindly followed just because Britain was like very good at navigating the ocean, and they had like a really good and very strong royal fleet, and they were good at building ships, and they had like a really good they had like probably the biggest, or maybe like the greatest bunch of ships and the fleet. They were like, yeah, sure, like why not? Because you're good at it, so we're gonna follow you. So it's kind of crazy that because they were so good at it, besides like they managed to like conquer the whole world, like we also owe that, we owe to the royal fleet, and the naval fleet, like we owed our time zones to that. So it's kind of insane, if you think about it, like the ripple effect of them like we're gonna be building like really good ships because we want to like conquer the whole world, we want to trade with everyone, and we're gonna like dominate all the world's oceans. And like it ended up in this, like Britain is time zero, and everything, like all the time zones are measured, because of that. But I was thinking, also, I don't think I've never, because I don't know why I always saw, the GMT thing, and I always found it confusing. But now that he explained it, I think I'm going to be more like, oh, for GMT, because I think I kind of tend to measure stuff in like Eastern and Pacific. But now I'm like, oh, okay, so I get it now. I get the GMT, and I get how come, like if you're in Europe, because like everyone in Europe is always like 4 or 5 hours ahead. And if you're like opposite Europe, in the American continent, it's earlier. But now that I know what GMT means and how come, you sort of like go an hour, or you like decrease hours if you're like at the west of London or of England, now I can understand, and I'm like, oh, okay, so I think now I can get it a little bit better. But I think it was funny how they were like in the Pacific, and in the time where they both well, not both, where like the timeline sort of like it gets all messy and confusing because you have arrived 12 hours ahead, but you arrived from the other place and it's like 12 hours earlier. So, and it's like a point there where it's like it's the other day, because of course if you're moving like from London to the right, like it's gonna move ahead, but if you're going to the left, it's going to decrease. So when the point of like convergence is like it should be, it's not like zero again, of course not. It's like the people in here, they went ahead with their day, and the people on the other side were just again back in, they continue on with their day. So what I think is funny is that he was like I think it was Baker Island, and in Baker Island is like 5 a.m. of like, I don't know, of like July 4th. But on the other side, it's like ahead. So, but they're very close to each other, right? They're like in the middle of the Pacific, but they're islands that are very nearby. So I think it's funny to think of like you being like Fiji, and you're like, okay, so I'm gonna go to Baker's Island, or some other island that's located there, and it's gonna take you, I don't know, maybe like 2 hours, an hour, and then when you go, it's like, oh, but you actually like you gain a day, and it's the opposite if you're in like Baker's Island and you're going to Fiji, or I don't know, maybe I don't know if places like Indonesia or Australia are closer, or they share the same time zone. But whatever, you're going there and it's like, oh no, I actually like lost a day. But it's not like I travel, because I think that's more common if you're like going to, I don't know, Japan or something from the other, like in the opposite side of the world. You're expecting, time zones are a thing. So you're expecting, like if I took like a 12-hour flight, it's normal that obviously time zones are going to change, and I either lost time or gained time. But if you're like so close, it's weird to think like, but you're like right next door. How come you have like a completely, like I lost a day? But yeah, I love this video, and hopefully you did as well. And now you can better understand GMT. But that was it for today, and I'll see you next time. Bye.